My name is Natalie Cross. I'm 25 years old, and for the past 7 years, I've been holding a secret that cost me my entire adolescence. Not because I wanted to keep it, because I was legally bound to. The envelope arrived on my birthday. Heavy cream paper, the kind that feels expensive between your fingers. Inside was a single document, Certificate of Non-Disclosure Agreement Expiration. Beneath it, a handwritten note from a lawyer I'd never met. You are now free to speak. I sat at my kitchen table in my studio apartment in Portland, staring at those words until they blurred. Free to speak. As if freedom was something you could schedule 7 years in advance. As if the silence hadn't already carved out everything soft inside me and replaced it with something harder, colder, more precise. I didn't celebrate my birthday that year. I didn't post about it. I didn't blow out candles or pretend to be surprised by generic well wishes from people who barely knew me. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document, and began typing the story they paid me $50,000 to never tell. But before I explain what they bought my silence for, you need to understand who they were, and why a 17-year-old girl would sign away her voice for 7 years without asking a single question. I grew up in Bellingham, Washington, in a house that smelled like cedar and rain. My parents were good people, practical, quiet. My father worked in logistics at a shipping company. My mother managed the front desk at a dental office. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable, the kind of stability that feels invisible until it's gone. I had one sibling, my older brother, Owen. He was 21 when it happened. Brilliant, restless, the kind of person who could fix a car engine or write poetry with equal ease. He'd graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in computer science and immediately got recruited by a tech startup in Seattle called Helix Dynamic. Helix Dynamic was one of those companies you'd never heard of unless you worked in venture capital or read TechCrunch obsessively. They built proprietary algorithms for predictive analytics, systems that could forecast consumer behavior, stock trends, even political outcomes. Owen was part of their core development team. He was proud of that. He told me once over pizza in his tiny Capitol Hill apartment that he was building the future. 3 months later, he was dead. The official report said it was a car accident. Single-vehicle collision on I-5 near Everett. He'd been driving home late from the office. The police said he'd probably fallen asleep at the wheel. The car had veered off the highway, struck a concrete barrier, and flipped. He died on impact. My parents believed it. They had no reason not to. Owen had been working long hours. He was exhausted. The coroner's report was clean. No drugs, no alcohol. Just a tired young man who made a fatal mistake. But I didn't believe it. Not then. Not now. Because 2 days before Owen died, he called me. It was late, past midnight. I was 17, annoyed at being woken up, but his voice was strange, tight, urgent, like he was speaking through clenched teeth. "Nat," he said, "if anything happens to me, don't trust what they tell you." "What are you talking about?" I asked, still half asleep. "Just promise me. Don't trust the story they give you. Look for the gaps." I laughed, uncomfortable. "Owen, you're scaring me." "I'm serious," his voice cracked. "They're watching everything." I tried to... The line cut off. Static, then silence. When I called back, it went straight to voicemail. I assumed his phone had died. I fell back asleep. 2 days later, he was gone. The funeral was small. Owen's co-workers from Helix Dynamic didn't attend. No flowers, no condolence cards, no formal acknowledgement from the company that had consumed his final months. Just silence. A week after we buried him, a man in a charcoal suit appeared at our door. His name was Richard Carver, and he was Helix Dynamics' head of legal affairs. He carried a briefcase and spoke in the soft, measured tones of someone who'd delivered bad news many times before. He expressed condolences. He praised Owen's brilliance. Then he slid a document across our dining table. It was a settlement agreement. Helix Dynamic was offering $50,000 to the family in exchange for our signature on a non-disclosure agreement. The terms were clear. We would not discuss Owen's employment, his work, or the circumstances of his death with anyone outside immediate family for a period of 7 years. "Why 7 years?" my mother asked, her voice small and broken. "Standard protocol," Carver said smoothly. "It protects proprietary information and prevents speculation that could harm the company's reputation. It's really just a formality." My father looked at the check. $50,000. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was more than we'd see in months. And Owen's death had already cost us. Funeral expenses, lost income, the crushing weight of grief that made it hard to think about anything else. "We don't want to cause trouble," my mother whispered. Carver smiled gently. "Then this will be very simple." They signed, and then they looked at me. "Natalie needs to sign too," Carver said. "She's a minor, so you'll co-sign as her guardians. But the agreement binds her until she turns 25. I stared at the paper. Something about it felt wrong, not just legally wrong, but morally wrong. But I was 17. I was grieving, and my parents were asking me to help them. So I signed. The next 7 years were a study in controlled silence. I went to college. I studied psychology, drawn to it because I wanted to understand why people lie, why they break, why they stay silent when speaking would save them. I graduated with honours. I moved to Portland. I got a job as a research assistant at a non-profit that studied workplace ethics. I never spoke Owen's name in public. I never mentioned Helix Dynamic. When people asked about my family, I said I had a brother who passed away in an accident. If they pressed for details, I changed the subject. But privately, I was building a case. I kept everything. Newspaper clippings about the accident. Owen's old laptop, which my parents had packed away and forgotten. His journals, his emails, his cryptic text messages. I taught myself basic data forensics. I learned how to recover deleted files. I spent my evenings piecing together fragments of his final months, trying to find the gaps he'd told me to look for. And I found them. Owen had been working on something called Project Seer. It was a predictive algorithm designed to analyze social media behavior and forecast mass movements, protests, elections, consumer boycotts. Helix Dynamic was selling it to corporations and political campaigns. But Owen had discovered something. The algorithm wasn't just predicting behavior, it was shaping it. In his notes, he described how the system could subtly manipulate feeds, amplify certain narratives, suppress others. It was influence disguised as insight. And it was being sold to the highest bidder without oversight, without regulation, without disclosure. Owen had tried to blow the whistle. He'd contacted a journalist, he'd prepared a report, and then he died. If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, like the truth was buried so deep no one would ever dig it up, leave a comment below. Let me know you're out there. Because for 7 years, I thought I was the only one who remembered. The day I turned 25, I didn't hesitate. I contacted 3 journalists simultaneously, reporters who specialized in tech accountability. I sent them everything. Owen's notes, the recovered emails, the forensic timeline showing that his car's onboard computer had been remotely accessed 2 hours before the crash, the proof that Helix Dynamic had covered up his whistleblowing by framing his death as an accident. Within 48 hours, the story broke. Helix Dynamic, accused of covering up employee death after attempted whistleblowing. The company issued a statement denying all allegations. They called Owen's death a tragedy and insisted there was no evidence of foul play. But the press didn't stop. Other former employees came forward. They described a culture of surveillance, intimidation, threats. One engineer admitted he'd been paid to sign an NDA after witnessing irregularities in Project Seer's deployment. Within 2 weeks, federal investigators opened an inquiry. Within a month, Helix Dynamics investors began pulling out. Within 3 months, the company dissolved. Richard Carver, the man who'd sat at our dining table and handed my mother a check, was named in a civil lawsuit for obstruction of justice. He resigned quietly and disappeared from public record. My parents called me once the news broke. My mother cried. My father said he was sorry, not for signing the NDA, but for not listening when I told them something felt wrong. I didn't blame them. Grief makes people small. Fear makes them smaller. But I also didn't absolve them. Some choices, no matter how understandable, still leave scars. The legal fallout lasted 2 years. I testified 3 times. Each time I brought Owen's laptop, his journals, his voice. I made sure the people who'd silenced him heard his name again and again until they couldn't forget it. The settlement I'd signed expired, but the silence it had enforced didn't disappear overnight. Even now, there are days when I start to speak and feel the weight of that contract pressing against my throat, reminding me that some truths cost more than others. I don't work at the non-profit anymore. I consult for organizations that investigate corporate misconduct. I help families who've lost people under suspicious circumstances. I teach them how to look for gaps, how to ask the right questions, how to refuse silence when someone offers them money for it. And every year on Owen's birthday, I visit his grave. I bring coffee, black the way he liked it. I sit on the grass and tell him what I've done with the freedom he gave me. Because that's what it was. Not a burden, not a tragedy. A gift. He knew I'd figure it out. He knew I'd wait. And when the time came, he knew I wouldn't look away. People ask me sometimes if I regret signing that NDA, if I wish I'd fought harder at 17. The truth is more complicated than regret. I was a child, I was scared, and I was handed a contract designed to exploit exactly that fear. But what they didn't anticipate was that I'd use those 7 years to prepare, that I'd turn silence into strategy, that I'd become the kind of person who doesn't just speak the truth, who documents it, protects it, ensures it can't be buried again. They thought they were buying my compliance. What they actually bought was time for me to become dangerous. The NDA expired the day I turned 25, but the reckoning it delayed? That was just beginning. If you're wondering what happened to Project Seer, the answer is nothing good. After Helix Dynamic collapsed, pieces of the algorithm were acquired by shell companies, rebranded, resold. The technology didn't disappear. It just went underground. But now there are people watching, researchers, journalists, families like mine who refuse to let their loved ones be erased. I'm one of them, and I'm not done yet. My name is Natalie Cross. I kept my brother's secret for 7 years because a piece of paper told me I had to. But silence doesn't mean surrender. And sometimes, waiting isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sharpest form of revenge.